My name is Stuart, and I'm an addict. And I'm happy to be here at Fred Brown's.
Whoa.
I was, what?
Fred Brown, anytime you say that, I celebrate.
I was at Fred Brown's. I went there in 1988. I was in the Sepulveda house, and I managed that house for about 2.5 years. And then I facilitated groups for him for another 5 after that. Nancy asked me why I bring the donuts. I got a judge sent me to county for 6 months, and then I was court ordered into treatment, which was up in Northern California that I went. And so while I'm in the county, I'm talking about 1987 here, this guy comes in and he's got a year in the county as a habitual drunk driver. So he had been to some meetings and stuff, and he tells me, well, when you go to this treatment, they're gonna want you to go to meetings. And I said, what the hell's meetings? And he goes, they talk about, I says, they're gonna talk to me, and I'm not gonna wanna shoot heroin in the morning. And I said, that sounds like the stupidest thing I ever heard. But anyway, he said, there's a meeting in here tonight. And I said, there's a meeting in here? And he said, yeah, and he says, he's trying to talk me into going to it. And so he says, they have coffee and they have donuts. He says, sometimes they have bear claws and sometimes they bring women. Well, so I went to that meeting and I drank all kinds of coffee. I was up all night. I ate about 5 bear claws. And I found out y'all lie because they don't bring no women in there. But anyway, so in my first meeting, I went, the attraction was the donuts. So I bring them. I do panels in Long Beach and I bring those. So anyway, that said, that's the answer to that's why I bring them. And I can afford it. When you're clean and sober 35 years, you can afford a lot of shit. Now I'm gonna say, I was in treatment up in Northern California for about 6 months. And I met a guy up there that became very instrumental in my recovery. He's still part of my recovery. And he was coming down here to go to court. A drug addict with court problems. You guys ever heard of that?
No.
I never heard of that. And so he was staying in the Sepulveda house. They would let him stay on the couch before he'd come back the next day. So he was telling me, hey, we should move in there. So I followed his lead and we moved in there, and I moved in there, and there was a guy named Brett, they call him Brett Booze Man. He was in there, and I was 40 when I moved in there. And Brett was like 22. So they said I was like his dad, that's changed now. But, and then also when I moved in there, the manager of the house was Fred Brown. Fred Brown was, he was, I don't know if he was married or what, but he was getting out of a relationship, and he had bought a condo on Point Fermin. And so he was living in the house with us, and we were about the same age, same temperament. And so me and him got along real good, but he didn't tell me. He said he had made up his mind before he let me know. He said that I was going to be the manager there. And when he told me, I said, I don't even have a year. And he said, don't worry about a thing. Because his office was in the back of the Sepulveda house. There was a garage back there and had a little office, and he ran the business through there. And I'm going to say about Fred, Fred was a regular guy. He had faults just like anybody else. He was an addict, and he was a pretty good businessman. He set all this up. Now I know it's been refined through the years and changed, but he started all that. And so what he told me was, he said, I'll be here all the time, and so, because he was right back, so he was there all the time. Me and Fred did a lot of things. We used to, we went to the World Convention of Narcotics Anonymous in 1989 in Florida. We used to go to seminars. There was a hot book. The guy was John Bradshaw, and he did the inner child shit. And so me and Fred went, and one other guy. And this other guy was a banker. He had went to Notre Dame, highly educated. He just liked cocaine, you know. And so we went to this workshop, and it was 4 days, and we had our rooms, and they would take you in, and they said you can't be in a group with the same guy. And so we were all in different groups, and they would have these little workshops, and there'd be about 15, 20 guys, and then they put a chair and a chair, and you sit in the center and talk to who you want to talk to. So we were out, I come out of the intermission, and here comes Chris with his hand bloody and all wrapped up like that. I say, Chris, what happened? And he said, well, they had my dad in there. And I was talking to him, and I was looking at him, and he wouldn't talk. And he said, finally, he said, I went to hit that son of a bitch, and he ducked, and I hit the chair, and look what I did in my hand. And Fred looks at me, and he goes, this guy's an educated guy, right? And he goes, he really knows that he wasn't sitting there, doesn't he? You know? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, he has some major issues with his dad. Fred was right on that. So anyway, you know, I spent a lot of time with Fred. We used to jog down on the Paseo down there. You can see I don't jog much now, but and Fred comes in there one day, and I had a little over a year, and he said, are you getting loaded? And I said, no, Fred, how could you say that to me? You know I'm not. And he said, well, you look like a dope fiend. He said, you have the mannerisms, you know, you act like one. And, you know, a lot of things we come around here, we don't want to lose our, you know, street credit. You know, you want to have your, you know, your image. And he said, you know, you got to start doing better. You got to dress better, act better. And he said, and that car out there has to go. And I said, that's got to go. And he said, are you saving any money? And I said, oh man, I got more money I ever had in my life. And he said, well, go get a new car. Have you ever got one? And I said, no. Fred Brown told me to go buy a new car. And I went and did it. First time I ever bought a new car. And so about this time, well, I had been looking for a sponsor. And I said, Fred, what do you look for in a sponsor? And he says, you look for someone who has something you want. He said, you'll know it when you see it. And I used to, I was a longshoreman, I'm retired, and I used to go hauling in the morning, and then I would go across the street, and they had these guys in these trailers there, and I would go over there and fix in the morning. And so we used to sit there and fix, and then throw the cottons out like that. You know, they have those little, what do you call it? Little windows like that. And so one day I'm over there, and I see this guy in the dirt. He's picking up the cottons, and he's gonna go pound the cottons, you know. And so when I first started coming around here, and I'm looking for a sponsor, and I kept seeing this very soft-spoken, very gentlemanly guy. And it took me a while to put together, that guy was that guy. And I went, holy shit, that's the guy for me. So he became my sponsor. I wanted what he had. He had made that change. And so I was out at a meeting, and I used, shall we say, colorful language. And these girls came up to me after a meeting, and they go, we're so offended by all the profanity in the meetings. But with you, it rolls off your tongue, and it's so natural, it's not offensive. Well, hell, with that, I proceeded to spew obscenities all over the fellowship. Then Richard comes up to me, and God bless Richard Pacheco. He died. He died from hepatitis C. If any of you have problems with that, I say certainly go get it. I have problems with it now. But he comes up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Everyone knows you can cuss like a longshoreman. You are a longshoreman." He says, "Start to represent yourself in a more dignified fashion. Expand your vocabulary." And what Fred and Richard, we're talking about is recovery should be in all aspects of your life. There's nothing you shouldn't be looking at. I remember they used to say, what do you need to change? Everything. And there was a guy around there then, and he used to say, we're off drugs now, and we can climb up out of the gutter and sit on the curb if we want. And curb sitting wasn't for me. That's not what I wanted. I see right now in my life, there's 3 guys that I know that have problems with alcohol, but they don't want any program. See, one of them, he's my age, he's 76. There's another guy who's 65 and another one that's 60. And they've all talked to me about, their their alcohol problems. And I tell them, you need to go to meetings, you need to, get a sponsor, work some steps. And as soon as you say that, their eyes kind of glaze, shit, we don't need to do all that crap. And so the one guy, I talked to him about a week ago, he's drinking again. And another one of them, he had a couple years. He thought, oh, that's good. See, it's just about not doing drugs, not getting loaded. And so he got real drunk and he ended up in a hospital for about 5 days, but he doesn't want to change anything. Well, to me, not getting loaded is the floor. That's the floor. They're offering so much here in, they're offering a freedom. I have a friend of mine, he's coming up on 42 years, and I went and got him a card, and on the front of it has firecrackers, and then it says 42 years, it says freedom. That's what they're offering here. I mean, if you just want to get off, if it was just about drugs, I go get loaded, because my life has become so full in so many other ways. They're offering you to be better fathers, better mothers, better grandparents. That's what's being offered here, to have a full and meaningful life, there's guys that all they want, they live their whole life in the bucket, Well, there's much more to be offered. My granddaughter, they were trying to have a child, and they couldn't do it, and then they were trying to adopt, and then COVID came and messed it up, and they're finally, in 2 days, they're going to be able to bring that a baby home. She's 9 months, and that child was born addicted. And then I know others, there were some other babies that they're born addicted. Well, that's what we do, but we have the ability to change that. To live better, to do better. There's productive members of society. That's the goal. And I know with Fred, one of his things he always says, he said, how do you do any of that? And he goes, well, you show up. You show up every day. It's a day by day thing. People want to get, they want to acquire and get on. It doesn't come at once. And maybe what you want isn't going to come, but good things will come, but it's a day at a time program. Now, so I am a guy from San Pedro. I was born in the old hospital, and I used to live, I still own that house now. There's a house on 37th and Leland. It's a block from the ocean there. And I was brought up there, and I thought I had a very normal childhood. But my dad was an alcoholic, but he wasn't a violent alcoholic. And he wasn't a guy you saw drunk and passed out and all that. He wasn't that way, but he was always drinking. On the night he died, he had his scotch right there, and it was half gone, and 3 or 4 cigarettes in the thing, right to the end for him. And in my family, I had 3 sisters and a brother. They are all deceased, and 2 of them, on their death certificate, it says from the effects of drug and alcohol. So that's what happens. If we can all have that. If you're an addict, you can have that if you want it. But anyway, So I was brought up there and I thought I had a beautiful childhood. I played baseball down there, Bach Field. You know, I had a friend in high school. We were about 14, 15 maybe. And he says, and he was a big guy. He played center on the basketball team. And he was one of them, not like typical basketball players are skinny. Not, he was one of them big ones like Charles Barkley. He told me the same thing, Charles. I heard Charles Barkley say, I said, how are you going to play against them guys down there? Those. He goes, well, it's real simple. You put a butt in them, they get out of the way, and you get the rebound like that. That's what Charles Barkley said too. So he said, let's go fishing tomorrow and not go to school. So we didn't go to school. And we went down to Beacon Street to get a wino to buy us a couple quarts of beer. And we come across now, this was a guy, I knew this one guy because I played football with, his name was Felton Williams. But this was a much older brother. And when I saw him, I didn't know what to make of it. I'd never seen a transsexual before. I went, shit. But it was a good deal because if you get a wino, he wants a cut. You know, he wants a beer or some change or something. And this guy didn't charge us anything. So we went down to 22nd. We went halfway down that warehouse and there was a little ladder. We went down there and we drank our beer and we fished and we got up to leave and we walked around and we went around the other side and there was a lift jitney. He said, let's start that up. So we started it up when he's driving it. And then we look around and I said, hey, the Port Police are behind us. He goes, shit, let's run. So he jumps off the thing. It smashes into one of them doors there. And he said, go run faster. And the cop car's next to me. You know, the cop's going, hey. I give up. I was a stupid kid, but not that dumb. And so they round us up and they go, so, you know, if you wouldn't have run, you guys are both big kids. We would thought you were just working here. And he goes, so you're not in school, you've been drinking, and you caught some fish. Where did you get the fish? And we said, right over there. And the guy goes, oh man, come on. Give me a break. You kids better stay in school. You mean under that no fishing sign you were telling us? So, yeah. So they took us home. That was the first time I ever rode in a police car. And my older sister had gotten married and she was in an apartment right across from his dad. They had moved out of Barton Hill and they had a new house there. And so the next day I asked him, how did you make out last night? And his dad was a big guy. They called him Boats, as big as a boat. And he said, oh, he came in drunk and drop kicked my ass into bed. And I said, oh, well, my sister was covering for me. And my dad had more practical reasons. He was worried about who was paying for the damn door. And he got it written off as longshore damage. Now, I went on there. That was my kind of those years. And there was a lot of experimenting as we all do. And I remember that when I was out there and they're passing a bottle of wine around and I would take it like I was drinking the shit out of it. And I really, what I wanted was to be there with those guys. That was very important to me, to be with the guys, to be accepted. You know, if they're passing a joint, I I wanted to be accepted there. I had that need, whatever it was. So we went on and I graduated high school and they were like, what do they call? They had A and B. So I graduated like in February. And then on June 1st, I joined the Longshoremen because in those days they had what they call sponsorships. Like now they have the, what do you call them? Casuals. Yeah. They didn't have that then. So I joined the Longshoremen and it was wonderful. I ended up with a guy, well, I went to work right away and I worked a couple of weeks. And then I had connections that knew this guy and his name was Jackie McCoy. And he was a fight manager. And he had, on the East Coast, they had, what was it, Angelo Dundee. He had Cassius Clay and guys like that. Well, Jack had all the fighters on the West Coast. So, people would come up and about 5 years, I'm going to be 76 years old. And about 5 years ago, a guy comes up to me and he goes, I know who you are. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, you're the guy that used to be Jackie McCoy's caddy. And I go, you remember that this many years later? So at that time, so I ended up becoming a roommate with a guy who was ranked number 10 in the world at the time. And back in those days, there was one world champion. And then up above us lived Mondo Ramos, who was the most electrifying fighter in the world. And but Mondo was one of us. See, he didn't like to train. He liked to get loaded. And he ended up fighting guys and he got his brains beat out. And he was probably the best fighter in the world. But he never wanted to train. I was in the Army and I come down to see him. I know he's fighting a big fight. And he says, I said, "You been training?" He goes, "Train? Shit." He goes, "I got these whites. I'm going to take them." And he said, "If I don't get the guy out of there in 4 rounds, I'll be in trouble." But we hung out together and I was getting loaded with him all the time. And then things went along. And then I ended up getting drafted and I went in the Army. And, the war was on, the Vietnam War was on, and people were scared that they were going to get, go to Vietnam and get killed. And anyway, so I stayed my 2 years in there, and I came out of the Army, and it was like, hallelujah. There was all kinds of stuff. There was the civil rights movement, there was the anti-war movement, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I fit right in there. And I started experimenting with everything. There was a lot of white heroin around because it was coming in through the military. They had connections. And I was I experimented with all the different drugs, all the food groups. But I liked two. I liked alcohol and I liked heroin or anything opiated. And I always thought that, I was different. I just like to get, like I'd see guys get passed out or they're all messed up. I thought, well, that's no good. They're not having any fun. I like to keep a steady high. There was an old movie where the guy, when he wasn't loaded, it was in black and white. And then when he got loaded, it was in color. Well, that's the way I felt about it. I felt very depressed when I wasn't loaded. I didn't like not being loaded. And so I went on and I thought I was in control of it. But what really happened was, the truth was I had blackouts and stuff. And I had some bad blackouts. I was in the 70s and I was claiming 0 on taxes so I'd get a big return. And so I had this check for $1,700. It might have been 1980 maybe. So I go into this bar that I had and I says, "Can you help me cash this?" He goes, "Oh yeah, don't worry, bring it in tomorrow about 3. So I brought it in and he said, "I'm gonna go out running around. I might not be back for a few hours." Okay, and I said, "I only got $20. He goes, "You got a tab." So I started drinking, I got fronted some Coke, I was having a good time. It was nighttime, and the next thing, I'm at my home. I'm at home, and I was living in Manhattan Beach. I was in the tree section, what they call the tree section, if you're familiar with Manhattan Beach. And I'm looking around, and I feel terrible. I don't have my glasses. I don't have my keys. And worst of all, I have no money. And I go, "This is bad." And so I decided to walk back to that bar. And I'm walking down there. First half of it's uphill and then downhill. And I get to go in the door, and there's my car. And it's, how the lines goes, I'm parked cockeyed. And I walk up to it, and there's a ticket. And then there's, the door's ajar. And I open it up, there's my keys, there's my glasses, and about $1,500 spread around there. And I went, "Oh man, what a fortunate day." I gathered up the money, straightened up the car, and went right back in that bar. You got to get well. Another time there was a band I knew, and they were playing, and they lived down in Venice. They had a house on Venice Boulevard, which was real cool. So they would have parties. So they played. I went over to their house after the thing. They had a candy dish full of Reds. They had a pile of MDA there, and I remember doing. And the next thing I knew, I was at somebody else's house in Manhattan Beach, and I woke up and they come in there, and I go, "What happened? How did I get here?" And they go, "Oh man, yesterday Sunday, we went over there to see if the party was still going. And as we pulled up, you came out the side door of the house there, and you were walking down the street, happy, smiling. And I said, so what's the matter with that? And they go, well, you didn't have any clothes on. And these things happened to me, and I thought I was on top of things. And really I wasn't. And I didn't even think about a lot of that until 10 minutes. Okay. Until I got into recovery and started looking at that, what my actions and what I did. And when I was forced to come to recovery, my last year out there, I had 3 heroin cases, 2 drunk drivings in a month, and I had been married. But she was as big a drug addict as I was, and she always was pissing me off because she was always stealing my drugs. And so anyway, in that last year, she had died from a speedball, and I was having a very tough year there, and so I was going to court fighting all this. And one day I was sitting in there, and I was sitting next to a cop who had arrested me. And I was talking with him because I knew him. I don't know, you all might be, I hated cops. I didn't like them. And I've had to re-examine some of that. A lot of cops out there, I think, shouldn't be cops at all. But there's a lot of others that do a good job. And that's a hard thing to kind of look at. But anyway, I was talking to him, and the bailiff, who I knew from when I was a kid, comes up and he goes, Stuart, why don't you shut up? And I said, geez. He didn't want to say anything to him, So we went out and we talked a few minutes. And then my lawyer come over and said to me, you get along with him? And I said, he's a cop. He's demented, but yeah, he's an all right guy. And she said, well, will he say something on your behalf? And so I asked him, and he said, what do you want me to do? He goes, you guys don't get better. See, this is their view of us. I know what our view of them is. And he said, you're just guys who do drugs, make trouble, steal stuff, and you don't get better. And he said, if I put this, you're going to go to treatment. He says, you won't even go. And so he ended up writing a letter. And the judge used it when he sentenced me. He said, this is very unusual. And anyway, so then he sent me to, I had to go to the county jail for 6 months and eat donuts. And then he sent me to treatment up in Northern California. And I was up there, and I had, about 3 months, less than 3 months, and I was getting ready to come home. And I was talking all that good stuff. But then I realized I was going to come home because I was up in Concord, California, the East Bay up there. And I realized I was coming back and I was going to get loaded for sure. And I got real scared. And I realized, oh my gosh, that was the first time I understood what powerlessness was. I knew I was going to get loaded. So I had a little Puerto Rican counselor from New York, and he says, well, you can stay. So I ended up staying, and I met, I had a friend there that he's still very close and very big part of my recovery, the one that was sleeping on the couch there, and he said, let's go to Sepulveda House. And that's where I met Fred, and it was, I became the manager there, and I was, there till I had 3 years, and I had about 1.5 years. And I imagine you all do it the same way. You have a weekly meeting and all that, encounter group like, and this guy comes in there to interview for a bed, and he says his probation, whatever, he said, officer knows he's there. His wife wants to divorce him, take the kids, and he's going to lose his job if he can't stay here. And he's talking and talking, and he says, but he's got one thing on his mind. So afterwards, the guy said, what do you think of that guy? I said, he won't be here in the morning. And he wasn't. But I went to my room that night and I was thinking about this guy and I was feeling sorry for him. And then it hit me, I felt sorry for him because I wouldn't like him anymore. The desire that talks about right there had been lifted from me. The desire for drugs. I don't wake up in the morning, some of y'all talked to me and I went, oh, I don't need to do drugs anymore. But had been lifted from me. And I know a lot of guys think that's happened. While you're living here, it's hard to know when you get out there a while. But that desire had been lifted from me. And I no longer had that desire. And then my life, I realized had changed. And now my life, I mean, I do pretty much a life of, I don't work anymore, so I don't have problems with that. And I have money coming in, so I'm not worried about any of that. So some people, it's different. But I do pretty much a life of service now. H&I meets at my house every month, the area. I've been able to have that going on for the last 8 years. I do panels in Long Beach, and I try and be be part of the solution and not the problem. And your life changes. Cool. My life today is, I get to be a grandfather. I get to, like I say, my granddaughter and them are just adopting a child that was born addicted. And there was another baby they were talking about, that one was born addicted. That's what we do. And we get a chance to write some of that. You get a chance to be good fathers and good mothers. I could say drugs are way overrated, but nothing good comes from them. I know that. But they do a lot of, nothing good comes from drugs. Shit. I don't know any other way to say it. I currently, I had hepatitis C for about 40 years. And I tried to eradicate it several times with interferon. The old way didn't work for me. The only thing it did was throw out my thyroid. And so then about 8 years ago, they had the new drugs and I eradicated it. And I thought, this is a wonderful thing, I'm out of the woods. And then 5 years ago, I got the first tumor. And it was about like that. And so they went in and they took out a third of my liver. And then it goes here 4 years later, I thought, they say 5 years, is the thing. And a year ago, January, I got another one. And they performed what they call a thermal ablation. They stick a needle in there. It's bigger than a needle and it has little prongs and it grabs the tumor and then they microwave it. I know more about medicine now than I ever wanted to know. And so I got another one and it was a week ago tonight. I was getting released because they performed the same little thing on there. And if any of you have hepatitis, I imagine some of you do, I would say get to a doctor quickly because I had all the cancer problems after I got rid of the hepatitis C. I've known people say, well, it's in remission. I go, there's no such damn thing. It can do damage and it will do damage. And the sooner you can get off of drugs and you can get your life together, the sooner you can become a productive member of society, the sooner you can start receiving some of the gifts. And the gifts here are just incredible. You can get what they call freedom. You get, it's so much more than just not getting loaded.
Yeah.
You get a life where, what the highest compliment you could pay me is, well, you don't look like you ever used drugs in your life. And I said, thank you, that's a great compliment, because you want to address this in all your aspects of your life, and to be, a better human, to, Fred was big on some of that. Hey, we can do better and do better. And I'm, happy that I could be here. 2 minutes. And, when I heard it come to Fred Brown's, I went, oh boy, I hear people share about Fred Brown's and all like that. And so I knew him. I mean, I consider him my brother. And when he was meeting Roxy, he had just barely met, and there was another girl who I was married to. It didn't last long at all, because what I realized is she was still getting loaded. So that was over with. But one time, Fred goes, have they been coming over your house? And I go, oh yeah, they come over there once in a while. So one day I'm over there, and here's a knock at my door, boom, boom, boom. And I go down there, it's Fred, and he's, I go, Fred, what, man? He goes, oh, I ran over here. I thought Roxy and Eleanor were here. And I said, no, they left. They left, Fred. And then, for Fred, in his case, I mean, he was able to build this Fred Brown service, and it's still going years later, and it's still helping people. I remember that I went to their wedding, that was, what year was that?
1994.
94, long time ago. But 94, wow. Yeah, for me, Fred was a big part of my recovery in those early years, because I spent a lot of time with him, and it was I learned a lot of lessons from him. We did a lot of things, and he was setting this up the way he set it up. I think I was talking to them. He had a structure, and those were hard rules, and then the rest of it was group conscience. When I was running a group, all I had to determine was which it was. And if it was the group conscience, then that was going to be the law. But if it was one of the rules over here, you couldn't get loaded. I hear some of these recovery houses right now. I know some people in this girl's house in Redondo, and they said the girl got loaded, and was in the house loaded. And the owner comes up and says, well, we can't send her out because we could get sued. And I said, they had a loaded girl in the house? I mean, I don't know how you rationalize that. What if she went out and hurt somebody? Well, she's hurting somebody right here in this house being loaded. And I never, with the way we had it, and I'm sure it's still the same, those rules are hardcore, and they're not going to change. And for me, that was easy, and I loved managing. I managed for him till I had 3 years. I facilitated for him for another 5 years. He saw in me something that I didn't know that I was able to do, and I loved doing it. And here I am 35 years later. I'm trying to go to more meetings now. I don't go to enough, but I'm very active in H&I. The area, like I say, meets at my house, and I go on panels in Long Beach, and sometimes I go other places too. But for me, that's what I am doing for my recovery now. And so thank you very much for listening to me.